The coffee scalded her tongue, but Jenna Dixon barely noticed as she stared at the man across the charity gala's ornate ballroom, her friend Rachel whispering urgently in her ear about the billionaire Harrison Pierce, who apparently owned half the real estate in Manhattan. "Girl, you should totally go talk to him," Rachel insisted, nudging Jenna's ribs with her elbow. Jenna laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. "Are you kidding? That man is completely out of my league. I'm a high school art teacher who shares a studio apartment with 2 roommates. He probably wipes his mouth with silk handkerchiefs that cost more than my monthly rent." She wasn't wrong about Harrison Pierce's wealth. At 32, he had built a commercial real estate empire that spanned 3 continents, turning his father's modest property management company into a billion-dollar enterprise through ruthless business acumen and an uncanny ability to predict market trends. Tonight, he stood near the bar in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair styled just carelessly enough to suggest he didn't try too hard, his strong jaw and piercing blue eyes drawing attention from every woman in the room. But Jenna Dixon had no interest in men who lived in different stratospheres. At 28, she had carved out a life she loved, teaching teenagers how to see the world through artistic eyes and spending her weekends painting murals for community centers in underprivileged neighborhoods. This gala was a rare exception to her usual Friday nights, and only because Rachel had begged her to come as her +1 after winning tickets through her firm's charity auction. "You're being ridiculous," Rachel said. "Leagues don't exist. You're gorgeous, smart, talented." "And he's a billionaire who probably dates supermodels," Jenna countered, taking another sip of her overpriced coffee. "I'm not putting myself through that embarrassment." What Jenna didn't know was that Harrison had been watching her for the past 20 minutes, fascinated by the way she genuinely laughed, the way she seemed entirely comfortable in her simple black dress while everyone else preened and postured. He had attended 100 events like this, maybe more, and he could usually spot the social climbers within seconds. This woman was different. She looked like she would rather be anywhere else, yet she radiated warmth and authenticity. "Who is that?" Harrison asked his business partner, Marcus, who knew everyone worth knowing in New York society. Marcus followed his gaze and shrugged. "No idea. Want me to find out?" "No," Harrison said, surprising himself. "I'll handle this one myself." He made his way across the ballroom, navigating through clusters of Manhattan's elite, until he stood directly in front of Jenna and her friend. Up close, she was even more striking, with rich brown hair that fell in natural waves past her shoulders, warm hazel eyes, and a smattering of freckles across her nose that no amount of makeup could completely hide. "Hi," he said simply, extending his hand. "I'm Harrison." Jenna looked up and her eyes widened slightly as she recognized him. Rachel practically vibrated with excitement beside her, but Jenna maintained her composure, shaking his hand with a firm grip. "Jenna, this is my friend Rachel. Nice to meet you both." Harrison's voice was deep and measured, the kind of voice that commanded boardrooms. "I have to confess, I've been trying to work up the courage to come over here for the past 15 minutes. Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Somehow I doubt the Harrison Pierce needs courage to talk to anyone." "You know who I am." It wasn't a question, and he didn't sound pleased about it. "This is a charity gala for arts education in public schools," Jenna said. "Your foundation is the primary sponsor. Everyone here knows who you are." Harrison nodded slowly. "And that bothers you, should it?" She countered. Rachel, sensing she was somehow ruining the moment, excused herself to get another drink, leaving Jenna alone with the billionaire. The silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable but charged with something Jenna couldn't quite name. "Can I buy you a drink?" Harrison asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "That's a stupid question. The drinks are free." "They're also terrible," Jenna said, lifting her cup. "This coffee tastes like it was brewed with water from the Hudson River." Harrison laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "You want to get out of here? I know a place around the corner that serves the best coffee in Manhattan. Jenna studied him carefully. Is this how you usually operate, sweep women off their feet at charity galas and take them for coffee? I've never done this before, Harrison admitted, and something in his expression told her he was telling the truth. But you laughed when you saw me, and I want to know why. Heat crept up Jenna's neck. You saw that, I saw that. She could have lied, could have made up some excuse, but Jenna had never been good at pretending. My friend was suggesting I come talk to you. I told her you were out of my league. Harrison's expression shifted, something almost hurt flickering across his features before he masked it. That's the saddest thing I've heard all night. Why? Jenna challenged. It's the truth. Look around. Everyone here is worth millions, wearing designer clothes, probably vacationing in the Hamptons or the French Riviera. I live in a 300-square-foot apartment in Queens, and my big splurge this month was buying the expensive brand of acrylic paint. So you're an artist. I'm a teacher. I paint when I can afford the supplies. Harrison looked at her with such intensity that Jenna had to resist the urge to step back. Coffee, he said again. No expectations, no agenda. Just two people having a conversation over decent caffeine. And then if you want to go back to believing we exist in different leagues, I'll respect that. Against every logical instinct, Jenna found herself nodding. 1 cup. Then I need to find Rachel and make sure she hasn't cornered some poor investor and pitched her startup idea. She does that when she drinks champagne. They slipped out of the gala together, and Jenna texted Rachel that she would be back soon. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor's cart. Harrison led her 3 blocks east to a small cafe that Jenna had passed 100 times but never entered, assuming it was too expensive. Paolo, Harrison greeted the older man behind the counter. 2 of your house blends, please. Mr. Pierce, good to see you, Paolo said warmly, then glanced at Jenna with open curiosity. And a beautiful companion tonight. They settled into a corner table, and Jenna wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic mug, inhaling the rich aroma. The first sip was heaven, complex and smooth with notes of chocolate and caramel. Okay, you were right, she admitted. This is incredible. Paolo sources his beans directly from a farm in Colombia. He takes his coffee very seriously. How did you find this place? Harrison leaned back in his chair, and Jenna noticed how he seemed more relaxed here, away from the gala's oppressive atmosphere. About 5 years ago, I was having the worst day of my life. A deal had fallen through, I'd lost millions, and I was questioning every decision I'd ever made. I walked for hours, ended up here, and Paolo talked to me like I was just another human being having a bad day. I've been coming back ever since. I can't imagine you having a worse day, Jenna said. From the outside, your life looks perfect. That's the problem with outsides, Harrison said quietly. They rarely match what's happening inside. They talked for an hour, then 2. Jenna learned that Harrison had grown up in a modest household in New Jersey, that his father had worked himself to exhaustion building their small property business, that Harrison had attended college on scholarships and worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. He had built his empire through 18-hour days and countless sacrifices, and now that he had everything he'd once dreamed of, he wasn't sure what the point of any of it was. In return, Jenna told him about growing up in upstate New York, about her parents who had encouraged her artistic dreams even when they couldn't afford fancy supplies, about the moment she realized she wanted to teach when a middle school art teacher had seen potential in her messy watercolors. She talked about her students, their struggles and triumphs, and how every small breakthrough made her feel like she was changing the world in tiny but significant ways. You're remarkable, Harrison said when she finished describing a recent project where her students had painted a mural depicting their neighborhood's history. I'm really not, Jenna protested. I'm just doing what I love. That's what makes you remarkable. Harrison reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. Most people spend their whole lives searching for what you've already found. Jenna felt something shift in her chest, a dangerous flutter that warned her she was treading into complicated territory. "Harrison, I meant what I said earlier. We live in different worlds." "Why does that matter?" "Because worlds collide," she said simply, "and usually the smaller one gets destroyed." Harrison pulled his hand back, but his eyes never left hers. "What if I don't want to live in my world anymore? What if I want to see what yours looks like? You can't just decide to slum it with the common people," Jenna said, more sharply than she intended. "This isn't Pretty Woman. I'm not a project for you to fix or a way to rebel against your billionaire lifestyle. That's not what I meant." Harrison's voice was firm but not angry. "I'm asking if you would give me a chance to prove that leagues don't exist, that two people can connect regardless of what's in their bank accounts." Jenna stared at him, searching for any sign of insincerity. All she saw was hope, vulnerable and honest. "One date," she heard herself say. "A real date, not coffee after a gala, but you plan it and it has to be something that costs less than $50 total." Harrison blinked. $50? That's what I budget for fun activities per month. If you want to see my world, that's the limit." A slow smile spread across Harrison's face, and Jenna's heart did another dangerous flip. "Deal. Give me your number." They exchanged phones, and Jenna noticed his wallpaper was a simple photograph of a sunset. She had expected something more ostentatious. When they parted ways outside the cafe, Harrison hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her cheek gently. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he said. Jenna walked back to the gala in a daze, finding Rachel near the coat check. Her friend took one look at her face and squealed. "Oh my God, what happened? Tell me everything." "I think I just agreed to date a billionaire," Jenna said, still not quite believing it herself. 3 days later, Harrison texted her an address in Brooklyn and told her to wear comfortable shoes. Jenna arrived on Saturday afternoon to find him waiting outside a community center, dressed in jeans and a simple navy sweater that somehow made him look even more attractive than the expensive suit. "A community center?" she asked. "They're hosting a free art exhibition featuring local student work," Harrison explained. "Followed by a walk through Prospect Park, and then I found a taco truck that has incredible food for about $8 per person. I'm coming in under budget." Jenna laughed, delighted and surprised. "You actually did research. I told you I was serious." The exhibition was wonderful, filled with raw talent and youthful enthusiasm. Harrison listened intently as Jenna explained different techniques and movements, asking questions that revealed genuine interest. They walked through the park as leaves crunched under their feet, talking about everything and nothing. The tacos were indeed incredible, and they ate sitting on a bench watching dogs play in the fading afternoon light. "This is the best date I've had in years," Harrison admitted. "Maybe ever." "The bar must be pretty low in billionaire dating," Jenna teased. "The bar is usually non-existent," Harrison said seriously. "Most of my dates involve expensive restaurants where everyone is performing, trying to impress each other. This feels real." "It is real," Jenna said. "This is what normal people do." Harrison turned to face her fully. "Can I tell you something? I haven't felt normal since I made my first million. Everyone treats me differently, wants something from me. You're the first person in years who looked at me and laughed, who didn't care about the money." "I care about the money," Jenna corrected gently. "I'd be lying if I said it doesn't matter. It's a huge part of who you are and how you move through the world, but it's not why I'm here." "Why are you here?" Jenna considered the question carefully. "Because when you talk about your worst day, I can see the real person underneath all that success. Because you came to a coffee shop and talked to me like I mattered. Because you planned a date on a $50 budget and seemed genuinely excited about it." Harrison kissed her then, soft and tentative, his hand cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. Jenna kissed him back, feeling the rest of the world fade away until there was only this moment, this connection, this impossible thing growing between them. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and late-night phone calls. Harrison showed up at her school one afternoon, watching from the back of her classroom as she taught her students about Impressionism. Afterward, He told her it was the most inspiring hour he'd spent in months. Jenna visited his office building, overwhelmed by the sleek glass and steel, but Harrison pulled her into his surprisingly modest office and showed her the single painting he'd purchased from a student exhibition years ago. "It reminds me why I do this," he said, gesturing to the abstract piece. "To create opportunities for people who deserve them." They navigated their differences with humor and patience. Harrison learned to appreciate dive bars and food trucks, while Jenna occasionally allowed him to take her somewhere nice, though she drew the line at anything too extravagant. He met her roommates, who grilled him mercilessly until he won them over by fixing their constantly broken heater. She met his business partner Marcus, who pulled her aside and told her he'd never seen Harrison this happy, but it wasn't all easy. The first time photographers caught them together, Jenna's phone exploded with messages. Students whispered in her classroom, and parents asked uncomfortable questions. A gossip blog ran a piece speculating whether she was a gold digger, and Jenna cried in Harrison's arms while he promised to make them retract it. "This is what I was afraid of," she said through tears. "Your world destroying mine." "No," Harrison said fiercely. "This is tabloid garbage trying to destroy something beautiful. Don't let them." He hired a lawyer who sent cease and desist letters, and the blog took down the article, but the damage lingered. Jenna became hyper-aware of every glance, every whisper. When Harrison suggested she move into his penthouse apartment, she refused. "I need to maintain my own space," she explained. "I need to know I can exist independently of you and your money." Harrison struggled to understand at first, accustomed to solving problems by throwing resources at them. But he listened when Jenna explained that accepting too much too fast would make her feel like she was losing herself. They compromised, finding ways to blend their lives without one overwhelming the other. 3 months into their relationship, Harrison's father had a heart attack. Jenna drove with him to the hospital in New Jersey, holding his hand as he broke down in the waiting room. She sat with his mother, offering quiet comfort while Harrison paced the halls like a caged animal. When his father stabilized, Harrison introduced Jenna as the woman he loved, and his mother hugged her fiercely. "Thank you for being here," she whispered. "He needs someone who sees him, not just his bank account." The experience changed something fundamental between them. Harrison let Jenna see him at his most vulnerable, and she didn't flinch. She called in sick to school, stayed at the hospital for 3 days, and helped coordinate with Harrison's siblings. When it was over, when his father was recovering and they finally returned to the city, Harrison pulled her close in the back of the car. "I love you," he said. "Not because you're convenient or impressive or any of the superficial reasons I thought I'd love someone. I love you because you make me want to be better, because you challenge me and support me and make me laugh, because when everything was falling apart, you were exactly what I needed." Jenna kissed him, tasting salt and exhaustion. "I love you too, even though you're ridiculously out of my league." "Stop saying that." Harrison's voice was rough with emotion. "Please stop saying that." "Okay," Jenna agreed. "No more leagues, just us." 6 months after their first date, Harrison convinced Jenna to take a weekend trip. She agreed on the condition that they stay somewhere modest and that he let her pay for half. They compromised by camping in the Catskills, something Harrison had never done before. "You're a billionaire who's never been camping," Jenna had asked, incredulous. "I've been to 5-star resorts in wilderness settings," Harrison defended. "That counts." "That absolutely does not count." The camping trip was a comedy of errors. Harrison struggled with the tent until Jenna took over, laughing at his frustration. He burned the first attempt at campfire cooking, and a raccoon stole their supplies during a midnight bathroom trip. But sitting under the stars, wrapped in sleeping bags and drinking terrible instant coffee, Harrison had never felt more content. "I want to marry you," he said suddenly. Jenna nearly spit out her coffee. "What? Not right now," Harrison clarified, though his ears turned red. "Eventually, when you're ready. I just wanted you to know that's where this is heading for me." Jenna set down her coffee and crawled into his sleeping bag, curling against his chest. "That's where it's heading for me too," she admitted. "But I need time. I need to make sure I'm not losing myself in your world." "What if we built our own world?" Harrison suggested. "Something that's neither yours nor mine, but ours." They talked until dawn, planning a future that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Harrison wanted to shift more of his focus toward philanthropic work, to use his resources to create real change in education and housing. Jenna wanted to expand her teaching, maybe start a program that brought professional artists into underfunded schools. They dreamed together, building something beautiful from their different perspectives. When they returned to the city, Harrison started making changes. He stepped back from daily operations, appointing Marcus as CEO while he moved into a chairman role focused on the foundation. He sold the penthouse, too ostentatious for the life he wanted, and bought a more modest apartment in Brooklyn. Jenna finally agreed to move in with him, a place that felt like theirs rather than his. They painted the walls together, hung Jenna's artwork alongside pieces from student exhibitions, and filled the space with mismatched furniture from thrift stores and family hand-me-downs. Harrison's mother donated her old dining table, and Jenna's father built them a bookshelf. It was imperfect and cluttered and absolutely perfect. A year and a half after that first coffee, Harrison proposed properly. Not at an expensive restaurant or during an elaborate vacation, but in their apartment on a random Tuesday evening. Jenna was painting at the easel he'd set up near the window, and he simply knelt down beside her, holding out a ring. "I know we talked about this," he said. "But I need to ask properly. Jenna Dixon, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me that has nothing to do with leagues or money or what anyone else thinks? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that we're exactly where we're supposed to be?" Jenna set down her paintbrush with shaking hands. The ring was beautiful but not ostentatious, a simple sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the community center where they'd had their first date. Jenna wore a simple dress she'd found at a vintage shop, and Harrison wore the same navy sweater from that day, paired with dress pants as a compromise. Both families attended, along with close friends and some of Jenna's students who'd begged to come. Rachel gave a speech about laughing at billionaires, and Marcus talked about how Jenna had transformed.